I think Michael's going to just edit, but as Jeremy said, there are 34 votes from Sajid to redistribute round.
How might they go? How might they go?
Well, a few will go to Boris because there will be some kind of hardline Brexiteers who are still backing Saj because he was, quite hard on the kind of Brexit angle. Then there are some more kind of cabinet establishment types that will probably divide pretty evenly between Jeremy and Michael. And when there's two in them, it's very difficult to call. But I think the fact that Michael has just nudged ahead means I think he's got that momentum and will probably just about make it. But it's going to be so tough.
But the other thing is, of course, that Boris Johnson has so many that he has the ability to choose if he wants.
Yes.
They could just hand over 30 votes.
Has that been happening? There's a lot of talk about lending votes and sort of shenanigans and dark arts. Do you think that's been happening?
A bit, without doubt. And certainly MPs do it even if you try to discourage them. So there will be MPs supporting Boris Johnson who will be smart Alex, bluntly, who'll be too clever for their own.
But if they're all like that, he won't get any.
And it might
votes.
all cancel itself out. So it's that, but that does make it even harder to predict. So I'm getting my excuses in.
But numbers for Boris are important. The fact that he has half of the parliamentary party now is actually quite significant because it gives him quite a mandate. So actually, although it might be tempting to kind of lend votes round, I think the number he has will kind of put him in good stead and kind of makes the argument for him even stronger.
If it is Michael Gove, there's a lot of talk and a lot of worry by some Conservatives that it's a sort of rerun of the 2016 psychodrama, as it's referred to, and that it could become quite bloody.
I disagree with this. I think that they've got a long history. They were together at Oxford. They worked together for a long time. I think they've moved past it now. So I think it will be more a contest of ideas.
So they're not enemies, you don't think?
No, I don't think so. I think it would be kind of a contest of ideas, properly, if he did go through. So yeah, I think it would be interesting. I don't think the psychodrama will really be part of it.
I'm quite. Laura knows both of the individuals better than I do, and I'm happy to defer to her on that. The one thing I would say is that what has to be an anxiety for Boris Johnson is that Michael Gove does know a lot about Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson way out in front, but he knows what undermined his confidence last time around. He knows where he was strong, where he was not so strong. And that does, I think that would worry any political
Well, last time he
strategist.
pretty much implied that Boris Johnson wasn't capable of being Prime Minister, didn't he?
And I think that it's a very tough judgment that we will see if he goes through as to how to use that needle, if you like, or to try to be very Olympian and above the fray. Ultimately, I think whoever goes through, what they need to learn a bit from is Rory Stewart, because they're so far behind. They're going to have to mix it up. They're going to have to be a bit different. They're going to have to just campaign not really straight down the line in a very conventional, very small C Conservative way. They're going to have to try to rattle Boris Johnson in some sort of way. Now, I don't know how they might choose to do that, but that psychological, a bit like, the sort of Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger type thing. Those were two who knew one another very, very well and knew how to get under one another.
But I suppose the issue is that the wider party, the 160,000 or so members of the Tory party out there, the assumption is they love Boris Johnson. He's their kind of darling.
Yes, and certainly all the polling backs that up, but that he has an incredibly strong support base amongst the membership. But even then, it does change very quickly, and there is a significant chunk that are not sure about him. So although he is the overwhelming favourite, I don't think it's a done deal.
Quite interesting, he got endorsed today by George Osborne's Evening Standard, actually, saying that they were supporting him.
Yes, there are some interesting bedfellows at the moment, and people rushing to Boris Johnson's aid. I remember when Theresa May, when it felt as though she was going to win, and a lot of people were going around saying, I'm a key advisor, or I'm a key part of the team. Look, I don't know whether whether George Osborne really is sort of central to the way in which Boris Johnson is thinking, but there are people who would be, he would probably be happy for us to imagine that at the moment.
Okay, one interesting postscript was 2 spoilt ballot papers. I'll ask you later on who you think may have spoilt their ballot papers. Anyway, after today's votes, it's going to be down to the Conservatives Conservative membership, the wider party membership, as we've been saying, to pick their next leader and the next Prime Minister of this country. So we can get a flavour of their thinking right now. We're going to talk to a selection of them. Mike Rouse, who's Conservative councillor for Redditch Borough Council. David Pugh, who's the chairman of the Isle of Wight Conservative Association. And also Nicola Lowry, who's chair of the Telford Conservative Association, who we've spoken to before on BBC News. To you first of all then, Nicola, what's your latest thinking? Well, who would you like to see as the two who are presented to you?
I would like to see Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson in the final contest. I think you've heard from people today that a lot of people feel Jeremy offers something very credible. I think you'd see a very civilised campaign that hopefully focuses very credibly on policy, how they intend to deliver on the EU referendum and the vision for our country and party. My worry is that if Gove does get involved in the final two, it could be quite a divisive campaign. He clearly has a long history with Boris Johnson, and I don't think party members certainly want to see a rerun of the Leave campaign. So I hope, should Gove enter the final two, that it is a very civilised campaign which does focus on content rather than it being a controversial campaign. Clearly there's been a lot of tactical voting going on in Parliament today. Some people want to see two Brexiteers in there, and equally I think some people from Sajid's supporters will potentially be looking at backing Jeremy to ensure that we do get that civilised campaign. Now is the time for unity in this party, and I hope whoever does enter the final two that will honour that moving forward.
All right, Nicola, for the moment, thank you, but stay with us. Let's get the views then of David Pugh, the Isle of Wight Conservative Association. David, is that how you see it? I mean, if it was Boris Johnson against Michael Gove, would you be worried that might be a psychodrama, as it's been called?
I think that's rather dramatic language to use. So the fact is our members are looking forward to the opportunity for the first time in 14 years to actually have a say in who's going to be the leader of the party. We've got 800 members here, where a number of them are looking forward to that chance to have a say. And whether it's Michael Gove against Boris Johnson or whether it's Jeremy Hunt against him, the fact is that's going to be a clear choice for them to be able to make.
And David, the assumption, as I was discussing with my guests here, is that the Conservative Party membership broadly kind of adores Boris Johnson, that it would just rubber stamp his victory. Is that how you see it or not? Would it be a real contest?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't take anything for granted. I mean, Conservative Party members can be a fickle bunch. Clearly, there are people, and I've spoken to some of our members who are strongly supportive of Boris. There's people who have different views. In fact, some of our members were supportive of candidates who've now gone out of the contest, and they will be looking at what to do. So I think there is very much all to play for. We are interested to hear from the candidates, not just what they're looking to do for the country as a whole, but for us here on the Isle of Wight and other parts as well. So, you know, they've got to pitch their message to us, and our members will then decide.
OK. Thank you, David. A lovely day there on the Isle of Wight, by the way. Beautiful blue sky. Mike Rouse.
Every day.
Let's go to Mike Rouse, Conservative councillor for Redditch Borough Council. How do you see it, Mike? Who would you like, Mike, in the last two, and then which of those two would you vote for?
Well, originally I was supporting Dominic Raab, so I would have liked to see Dominic Raab in the final two, but that's not going to happen. And then after Dominic Raab was eliminated from the contest, I would have hoped to have seen Sajid Javid in the final two, but again, that's not going to happen. So I really don't know where my support is going to go. I guess as a Brexiteer who won my seat in a really strong Brexit area, it makes sense that I would want to see a Boris and Michael Gove final.
Effectively, you and your fellow Tory party members, about 160,000 of you, although I don't think anyone has the absolute final number, but you are choosing Britain's next Prime Minister. Some people think that isn't very healthy, that such a small slice of the population are choosing the Prime Minister.
Well, that's a great step forward from how it used to be. In the days of old, it used to be that just the 1922 committee and the parliamentary party decided this. But I do think it's probably time for the process to be looked at because, as you reported earlier today, there are rumours that there's been loaning of votes, and whether that's been coordinated or freelancing, what it's allowed to do to happen is that Boris, as the frontrunner, has been able to sit there and essentially sniper off or pop off the opposing candidates. So Dominic Raab first, Rory Stewart, and then Sajid Javid, all three of those candidates would have given Boris a really hard time in the contest and all gone, and effectively allowing him to choose his own opposition. And I don't think that can be right. I think the process should be looked at again. Perhaps the MPs should do a shortlist from the initial stages with the 16 threshold, or whatever that first threshold was, and then put the rest of the remaining slate to the membership, and we have a bigger choice amongst the membership. I think that something does need to be looked at there, because the contest doesn't feel right to me.
Good to talk to you all. Thank you very much. That's Mike Rouse, who's Conservative councillor for Redditch Borough, David Pugh, there, chairman of the Isle of Wight Conservative Association, and also Nicola Lowry, chair of the Telford Conservative Association. Many thanks to you for taking the time to talk to us. Let's just show you the scene, I think now we can, in Westminster at Committee Room 14, I should say. I think that is, which is where the 1922 committee will be giving us the results of the latest ballot, which will reveal the final two in who will then their names be put forward to the wider Tory party membership, three of whom we've been talking to, but there are 160,000 of them or so altogether, and that will then take place over the next few weeks. Let's go back to Joey Jones and Laura Trott. Joey Jones, former advisor to Theresa May, Laura Trott, former political advisor to David Cameron. Can I just ask you that question about, is there a democratic legitimacy here? Is there a question about that? Some people have raised it about this, 100,000 or so Tory party members choosing the country's next prime minister.
I think that the last point was probably a good one, that things have definitely moved on from where we were. This has only been in the last 20 years that Conservative Party members have even had a say in who was their leader. I think with membership, which unfortunately continues to dwindle somewhat, it's probably worth looking again at how you do that and how that's open to new people and to a wider populace, because it could be a problem. But then you have the converse issue. When you allow more people to come in, it's very open to manipulation, which some would argue happened with Corbyn.
But then if you just leave it to members of Parliament, they at least are democratically elected. They're representing Conservative voters in their constituencies, you could argue.
Yes, I think that the wider issue is just the fact that the bulk of the population is looking on and scratching their heads on this, and they're going to be presented with a prime minister that they've had no influence over. Ultimately, though, if they feel that they're let down, or if they feel that the whole thing is a stitch-up, well, they will have the opportunity to reflect that next time round in the ballot box. So if the whole process feels wildly out of kilter with democratic expectation, then the Tories will be punished for that.
But there was an interesting poll, I think YouGov poll, that was saying 46% of Conservative Party members wouldn't mind having Nigel Farage as their leader. I mean, they are pretty steadfastly hard line on Brexit, aren't they? And a lot of them very happy not to have a deal if that's what it comes to. Yeah,
Brexit is the overwhelming issue amongst the membership at the moment, which is why in many ways, if you have a Brexiteer and a Remainer going to the party, it won't be that much of a choice, because the overwhelming likelihood is the party will focus on a Brexiteer, which is why in many ways, if you had Michael and Boris, the two leaders of the Brexit campaign, that's possibly a bit more of an interesting contest.
The one thing I would say, though, is that there's an assumption among the members, I think, that Brexit means Boris, that he is the most credible. He's the one who feels it in his gut, in his marrow, and will ensure that we're out on the 31st of October.
Although Michael Gove in that TV debate the other day said, that Boris Johnson had joined him, so that sort of implying he was the original Brexiteer.
I think the point now, though, is if Boris Johnson, as he has, starts to hedge and waver and offer caveats and nuances around that 31st of October, then some of those party members who, yes, have a great deal of affection for him, but I think that is trumped by their obsession with getting out on the 31st of October, and they will be very angry if they think that he might let them down in that regard.
Joey, can I just ask you, by the way, Theresa May, who do you think she's going to be voting for? Because she has consistently said, I'm not telling anybody who she's voting for. Would it be, who do you think?
I think that if you look at the way in which the initial days after Theresa May was voted into office played out, then there was she's somebody who bears a grudge. So there was George Osborne, who was booted out in the first 5 minutes. Michael Gove given, you know, reasonably short shrift as well, and I think that I would speculate might well play a part. So I can't believe, given the way in which, I mean, there really has been bad blood between her and Michael Gove over the years. I think it'd be amazing for her to go and vote for him. Boris Johnson, I don't think he's flavour of the month in the May household at the moment. So
Jeremy Hunt, you think?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Michael and Theresa have made up though in recent years, because they had that massive falling out, but they've very much reconciled recently.
Yeah.
So,
and going back to the two spoilt ballot papers, a couple of people on Twitter were suggesting Theresa May might have spoilt her ballot paper.
Not her style.
No,
not her style.
Not, no.
Okay. So, well, we're going to find out very soon. It is going to be, whoever it is, it's going to be an interesting contest in the next few weeks, isn't it?
Yes, as I said, I think that because although Jeremy has very much pledged his mast to Brexit now, and he's really emphasised that throughout the debates, there will be a sense among the membership that he was not an original Brexiteer, and that does matter, I think, especially with Theresa May from last time round. So I think that
he's not a true believer.
Exactly, and they will feel they were hoodwinked last time, and, you know, are they being hoodwinked again? So I think from that perspective, if it is two Brexiteers in the contest, Michael Gove, who, as we all know, has supported Brexit for a lot longer than Boris Johnson has, versus Boris Johnson, could potentially be more interesting, although, as I said earlier, the overwhelming polling is that Boris will win. Just
one thing I would say, though, is that I know for us, this is exciting, this is nerve-wracking now. And I hope it is for people in the country as well, because I hope that they will.
They're on the edge of their seats.
Well, I hope that they will think that what confronts the two men who will go through. And I mean, there could be a tie now, and we have another vote later on.
Here they come. Let's listen in. Here is the result.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank my colleague officers and the staff of the House of Commons and our security officers and our own staff who have given us such tremendous support and service over the past 2 weeks. So on behalf of the 1922 committee, Charles Walker and I, as returning officers for the election of the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party, can now declare the results of the fifth ballot. The total number of votes cast in today's ballot was 313. The total number of ballot papers rejected was 1. The total number of votes given to each candidate were as follows: Michael Gove, 75. Jeremy Hunt, 77. Boris Johnson, 160. We therefore declare that Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson are going forward to a vote of the qualifying membership of the Conservative and Unionist Party. Thank you very much.
Well, there you are. That's Dame Cheryl Gillen of the 1922 committee announcing the result of that final ballot of MPs, the fifth and final ballot. Those are the two names then that go forward to the wider Conservative Party membership: Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary, and Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson on 160. He's edged up his support with every round, and Jeremy Hunt 77, just 2 votes ahead of Michael Gove. If it had been Michael Gove, there were people worried, as we've been discussing, that that would have been a revival of the so-called psychodrama between Mr Gove and Mr Johnson from 3 years ago, but that's not going to happen. It's going to be Jeremy Hunt, who originally was a Remainer, and Boris Johnson, of course, so prominent in the Leave campaign. Let's go back to my guests here in the studio. Joey Jones, former advisor to Theresa May, and Laura Trott, former political advisor to David Cameron. What do you make of that? It's going to be quite a contest, isn't it? And interesting.
It is. It's a huge thing for Jeremy Hunt. And
you surprised he made it?
Well, I know I have bragging rights round the table. I predicted it 10 minutes ago.
Well, you weren't sure.
It was very, very, very tight. I think that, to be fair, a couple of days ago I felt that he had stalled, and he has shown. He's been solid, steely, resilient. And this, for him and for Boris Johnson, is the biggest thing that they will ever have encountered in their political life. I mean, the step up that is expected of them, a magnitude, a whole series of magnitudes, the pursuit, the scrutiny, the media circus, the harrying, I mean, the whole lot, and the expectation that they can come up with a vision for the country and a credible personality for leadership. I mean, it's going to be a massive step up for
It's
both
been
of them.
so tight between Jeremy Hunt and Michael Gove, especially in the last couple of rounds, hasn't it? Just a couple of votes between them.
It really has, and they've been kind of neck and neck. And the fact that Jeremy's just edged it, I mean, does show that the breadth of quality of people, I think, in the party. And it's going to be a really interesting race as we go through. I think, as I said before, it is less likely that Jeremy will win versus Boris, but Boris was always going to be the runaway favourite. But we've got a huge contest coming up. We've hustings, 12, 13 hustings to go now, which are going to be publicised. So there's going to be a massive amount of scrutiny on both people.
Do you think in that television debate, the BBC one, Jeremy Hunt was viewed by quite a lot of observers as having done quite well, actually.
Yes.
Would that have had any influence, do you think, on the views of MPs?
It might have done. Look, I think there's a possibility that, and one shouldn't discount the fact that there might be some sour grapes and some questions over who's voted and why over the next couple of hours. So we'll wait and see whether on the losing side, Michael Gove's team might point some fingers. But let's assume that we're going now ahead and turning a page and a straight fight between the two of them. Jeremy Hunt's big advantage is that everybody's got an opinion about Boris Johnson and actually about Michael Gove as well. Nobody's got an opinion about Jeremy Hunt. Nobody's made up their mind on amongst the Conservative members as well. Extraordinary for someone who's been around for such a long time, still does feel like an unknown quantity, and that's a big advantage.
He's been in the cabinet continuously since 2010. He's been the only minister to have done so, and yet his name recognition is very, very low. So he does, as Joey says, have an opportunity to really stamp himself on this contest.
And we know the history of Tory party leadership contests is that sometimes the outsider does pretty well.
Absolutely.
Laura Trott and Joey Jones, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Let's get reaction to that news that's breaking at Westminster from our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young.
Yeah, and a huge gasp went up here as people heard that result. 2 votes in it. Couldn't make it up, could you? Let's speak to Ian Duncan-Smith, who is on Boris Johnson's camp. I mean, he's got what he wanted, hasn't he? He's got the easier ride, some will say.
No, I don't agree with that. I've worked with Jeremy Hunt over the years in Cabinet, and all I would say, he is a formidable politician, and I think it'll be a good and close-fought race, but I have to say that I hope a clean race. I'm very pleased Boris has got over 50% of the members of Parliament, something which nobody believed he would do. He is now very much the man to say to the membership, the MPs want me, now you have to decide if you don't want me, why? Because that's what we want.
I mean, he's got a lot of support because people think he's going to win, and some of them are doing it because it's true that some people have said to me over the last year what they feel about Boris Johnson, and you couldn't broadcast it, and now they're backing him.
This is politics, you know as well as I do. People decide who's going to deliver what they really want. The biggest issue is on Brexit. They believe that Boris will deliver a Brexit, but the most important thing I think of this is a sense of an upbeat nature, optimism for Britain. We've been too long talking ourselves down. We need to lift ourselves. Boris is the man to do that. I think Jeremy Hunt will fight a campaign again, which is about lifting optimism. Let's come back together again at the end of this with a real sense that Britain can make it through Brexit, out the other side, and do really, really well.
Is it enough? Is optimism enough?
Optimism and obviously decisions. We've got to leave by October the 31st. Boris has said that. Jeremy Hunt says he wants to aim at that, although he's been a bit more flexible. My general view is we're getting out October the 31st. But the truth is, if you believe in Britain, you believe in the skills of this country, you know we will do well afterwards.
Okay, Ian Duncan-Smith, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to bring in our next guest now, who is Guy Opperman, who presumably not feeling great at the moment because Team Gove.
Well, I'm obviously disappointed, but there's no recriminations. This is a fair ballot, and I thought Michael fought back superbly from a tricky start to the campaign, and I'm very proud to have been part of a campaign which was a very cross-party campaign with Brexiteers, Remainers, and I very much make the case that I thought he was a fantastic candidate who I was pleased to support.
And what has the race lost, in your view, now that he won't be going forward to challenge Boris Johnson?
Well, I think Michael is this is the adopted son of an Aberdeen fisherman. He brought something very different with a triumph of ideas, policy, delivery. But there are other very good candidates in the race, and I hope that both candidates, I wish them both good luck. They're both Conservatives. We will support them both.
There have been a lot of rumours about Team Johnson preferring to fight someone like Jeremy Hunt because he seemed to be a Remainer in the Brexit argument. There's been talk of skullduggery. Do you think there has been any?
No, there's no recriminations, there's no accusations. Listen, this is for the members to decide on an ongoing basis, and I believe very clearly that there is an opportunity for the members and for the media to hold both candidates, and it doesn't matter which candidate you've got in front of you, to account on what their policies are and how it is they're going to deliver these matters. And that's what matters to you and I, that's what matters to the wider country. It's the policies going forward that really count.
Have you spoken to Michael Gove?
Not yet, but I think I'm going to go and have a beer with him now.
So you're obviously disappointed. Have you thought about who you might support?
No, I think now is the time to have a large beer, recover after a long campaign, wish the two candidates who've got through the best of good luck, and we'll see what happens on the campaign trail over the next 4 weeks.
Just one final question. There were some of your colleagues who were worried about a Boris Johnson-Michael Gove runoff because they thought it would be too divisive because of their history, because they fell out last time round. Do you think that came into the thoughts of some of your colleagues?
I don't know. People will have to answer for themselves. I actually believe that you will not meet a more polite man than Michael Gove. He is the epitome of courtesy, and I think they could have had a perfectly reasonable, robust debate, just as you saw on Channel 4 or other events over the last few days. I think we could have done that quite happily.
Gentlemen, I will let you go and have that beer with Michael Gove. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. So disappointment there from Michael Gove's team, losing by just 2 votes.
Vicky, you talked about the gasps there. I mean, how much surprise has there been, do you think?
I mean, I think just because it's so close, I think there was one spoiled ballot paper as well. So I think for these teams who are obviously working for every single vote, they will be obviously disappointed. I spoke to Guy Opperman a little bit earlier. I think he was hoping they had managed to get over the line. But of course, people who tell you they're going to vote one way, they don't always tell you what they end up doing. So it is incredibly difficult to predict what is going to happen. But I think there was some unease amongst Conservatives that because of what happened before, Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, of course, were on the same team. Michael Gove dramatically last time round saying he didn't think he could actually support Boris Johnson, didn't think he could be Prime Minister, and then stood himself. I mean, that was so dramatic. People were talking about a psychodrama, and behind the scenes privately, that was the pitch. That was what Team Hunt was saying to MPs. They said, no, we can't have these two against each other. It won't be good for the unity of the party. I'm just looking around to see who else is here. I think we're going to try and bring in Alistair Burt to speak to us, who is just... We are live on BBC, Alistair. Alistair Burt's here to give his reaction.
Very pleased. The atmosphere in the room when we heard the result was very good. It's very close, but Jeremy Hunt is on the ballot paper, and I'm perfectly convinced that given time through the hustings process, they will see the Jeremy Hunt that we've seen over the years. Diligent, capable, very exciting ideas for Britain, and very sure that as a good negotiator, experienced negotiator, he can get the Brexit that the country needs.
I mean, a lot of people are worried because they say it's continuity May. He was a Remainer, the same as her, that actually the grassroots just aren't going to vote for him purely because of that.
Well, hold on. I mean, he's on the ballot paper and we're going forward. The grassroots will decide over the next few weeks. I'm perfectly confident that when they get the opportunity to see him, as they have done with his major roles that he's played with the NHS, in foreign affairs, the work he did with the Olympics, this is a man who's achieved things. I've absolutely no doubts that the grassroots already know and like Jeremy Hunt. They respect him, they know what he's done. I think they'll be really interested that he's the one who is challenging Boris Johnson and is going to give him not only a good contest but has the ability to win and heal and bring the country together.
Does he have the optimism? I mean, everyone talks about Boris Johnson's charisma, that he can excite people, he can be optimistic about Brexit. Can Jeremy Hunt do that?
You wouldn't have started the campaign with Jeremy Hunt and got this far if you hadn't been optimistic. Jeremy is optimistic, and he's always said that. You know, when he tried to tackle patient safety in the National Health Service, when he went to Stockholm to try and get the parties together for the peace conference in relation to Yemen, Jeremy is always optimistic about Britain. As someone who started his own business, his own company, when he could have done other things. That needs a degree of optimism, which he recognises is in many young people in the country, and that's why he wants to assist those who want to be entrepreneurs, wants to see business develop in the country. Jeremy is a natural optimist, and I think that spirit is going to carry him through and give the country and the Conservative Party a good feel about someone who can take us forward.
Do you think that the grassroots members do have an open mind? I mean, there's been lots of polling of them. They all seem to be in favour of Boris Johnson. Do you think they will come to this with an open mind?
Yeah, the Conservative Party has had a tradition of looking at leadership and being very open about it. When David Davis and David Cameron were involved, the conventional view would have been, well, David Davis is ahead, he's established and everything, and then there was the challenge from David Cameron, who could present things in a different way. No, I think Conservative Party members who are public-spirited, that's why they belong to a political party, they recognise also they're not just voting for themselves, they've got a responsibility to vote for people who don't have a vote this time. There will be a general election in due course. They will be choosing for people who don't have a political party, people who have another political party, for their children, for their grandchildren, for their parents, those who are younger members of the party. I think they'll take all that into account, and they'll look at both these candidates afresh and decide who is best for Britain. I don't think they'll be bound by what people have said in polls or what people have said in the past. And I think when you look at Jeremy that way, I think it's very exciting for Britain, very exciting with the Conservative Party, and we know that we're carrying out a duty for others, and I think the Conservative Party will take that really seriously and choose a serious individual for a great job.
Finally, whoever wins this has got a massive challenge of bringing the party back together. There has not been much unity around here in your party for the last 2 or 3 years. How are they going to do that?
I think we've got a remarkable ability to come together when the chips are down. And as I indicated a moment ago, I think if you press most of us here, we recognise that whatever may be the issues in the party, this is not a party thing, pure and simple. This is about the country. The country has made a momentous decision in relation to Brexit, and the country is divided 50-50, more or less, however you cut it. So somehow you've got to bring things together. So we recognise we've got a responsibility for the country as a whole. Now, who is best to do that? I think that someone with the personality of Jeremy Hunt, someone with the ability to bring people together, someone who starts from a position not of being seen as a divisive character, I think that is probably the best way of going into it. So let's see how it develops over the next 4 weeks. I think we'll know a lot more about ourselves as a party, a bit more about the country, and a lot more about Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson in the next few weeks. And I'm very confident that the Jeremy Hunt that I know will be preferred by our colleagues.
I did say finally, I've got one more question.
Yeah.
Have you worked for both of them in the Foreign Office?
Yes.
So you are in a unique position because you've worked for both of them. How do they compare?
Strengths and weaknesses on both sides, and I'm not being mealy-mouthed about it. I've got no personal animosity against Boris or anything else. A difficult choice for me. I have worked with them both. I like Jeremy. In a way, I worked with Jeremy in 2 departments, so I saw his work in 2 different places, and you choose on a whole variety of things. Boris Johnson didn't do me any harm in the Foreign Office. I worked with him on difficult Middle East issues. I worked on those in the same way with Jeremy. I respect Jeremy, I like Jeremy, I chose Jeremy, having worked with a number of different ministers, and I'm very confident about the choice that I've made. So no detriment to any other candidate, I don't do that sort of thing, but I've chosen Jeremy for positive reasons, which I think people around him would appreciate, and I hope the country appreciates. We're putting forward a good person with confidence, and actually at the end of the day, I think that matters.
Okay, Alistair Burt, thank you very much indeed for your reaction. So a very happy team there. Jeremy Hunt going through to challenge Boris Johnson.
Vicky, thank you very much indeed. We've got some reaction coming in from the various contenders. Let's just bring you Boris Johnson's. Michael Gove, actually, we've got. Michael Gove is saying, I am naturally disappointed but so proud of the campaign we ran. Huge thanks to my brilliant campaign team. It has been an honour to set out a vision for the future of our great country. Many congratulations to Boris and Jeremy. So that's from Michael Gove. His first reaction saying he's naturally disappointed. And Boris Johnson, who has triumphed there with 160 votes, pretty much double what the other two contenders got. He's also been tweeting with his reaction, and he says, "I am deeply honoured to have secured more than 50% of the vote in the final ballot. Thank you to everyone for your support. I look forward to getting out across the UK and to set out my plan to deliver Brexit, unite our country and create a brighter future for all of us." That's Boris Johnson. He got 160 votes, as you can see. Jeremy Hunt, 77. Michael Gove just knocked out, just eliminated, got 2 votes fewer than Jeremy Hunt. Let's go back to my guest here in the studio, Joey Jones, who was advisor to Theresa May, and Laura Trott, former political advisor to David Cameron. Interesting just listening there to Alistair Burt, who worked with them both in the Foreign Office, describing Jeremy Hunt as diligent, capable, and very different sort of personality from Boris Johnson in terms of charisma and sort of rhetoric and that kind of thing. Will that make a difference in this campaign, do you think?
Well, Alistair Burt was very measured, actually quite low-key, to be honest, when inside he must be, and that team will be bubbling with excitement. So he was clearly trying to keep the temperature down. And he, of course, his own words have been used against Boris Johnson. He's been caustic and critical of Boris Johnson in some of his the language he used in the past. So he was trying to do everything that he could to avoid getting into that sort of a slanging match. But it was an admirable effort from Alistair Burt, I must say, but it's going to be difficult.
Speaking of people who have been caustic about Boris Johnson in the past, a lot of the conventional wisdom was that he wasn't really liked by a lot of Tory MPs, and yet they have voted for him all the way through this in very large numbers.
Yeah, I think there have been 2 parts of this. The first is a sense that it's actually just Boris's turn, and that actually the Conservatives are in a very tricky spot, and at this point you then call for Boris because it's kind of you're at the last chance saloon.
And is there a herd mentality when they all sort of decide he's the man and they all go for him?
Exactly. And then the second part is, I mean, his campaign have been extremely effective at using the grassroots to put pressure on their MPs to then vote for Boris. There have been a number of MPs who have received letters from their associations calling on them to back Boris, and I think they've really felt that pressure as well. And to an extent, that's legitimate in terms of they should be reflecting some of their members' views. But I think the combination of those 2 things has been very powerful for Boris.
Just getting reaction as well from Jeremy Hunt. I think we can see a tweet from him in the last few seconds, and Jeremy Hunt says, "I'm the underdog. But in politics, surprises happen, as they did today. I do not doubt the responsibility on my shoulders to show my party how we deliver Brexit, and not an election, but also a turbocharged economy and a country that walks tall in the world." So Jeremy Hunt describing himself as the underdog. Well, Joey Jones, that's exactly what he is. No doubt about that, is it?
Aren't Brits supposed to love an underdog? I think there might be a degree of calculation in there.
But Michael Gove would have been equally the underdog as well.
And it's a statement of fact, for sure. It's interesting, there are some endorsements up for grabs at the moment. Michael Gove didn't say who he's going to vote for there. And there are a few people who've fallen out of the race. That at the moment, those 2 teams, they will be focusing on the next stage and the activists. But first things first, they'd like to get out of the blocks really strongly with a big backer in their pocket.
And Laura, just very briefly, Jeremy Hunt says surprises happen. Can you see any surprises happening now? Is there any chance that the crown that's almost on Boris Johnson's head might slip at this late stage?
As we've learned in the last couple of years, nothing in politics is inevitable, but I would be surprised.
OK. Laura and Joey, again, for the moment, thank you so much for being with us. Let's go back to our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, who's got more reaction for us in the central lobby of the Houses of Parliament. Vicky, back to you.
Yeah, that's right, everyone. Now looking ahead to the beginning of another round of this contest. That is Boris Johnson against Jeremy Hunt. The hustings, which will take place in front of Conservative Party members, begin on Saturday, and they will be televised. So there will be an awful lot of scrutiny over the next few weeks of both candidates. Let's speak to Robert Buckland, who is with me now and has been supporting Boris Johnson. He'll be quite happy now. You didn't want to have him up against Michael Gove, did you?
Well, no, I think the debate would have been lively. If it had been Michael, it would be equally lively with Jeremy Hunt. I think now the members will have a chance to ask questions, to scrutinise and to play their part in a very important selection process, which I hope will be dealt with in a very mature, calm and sensible way, as befits a process that is in effect selecting the next Prime Minister.
mean, all the surveys and polls of Tory party members say that this is an absolute shoo-in for Boris Johnson. Do you think there's any chance of a surprise? Do you think they're really going to come to this with an open mind?
Well, I think anybody who takes our members for granted is very unwise, and Boris certainly will not be doing that. He'll be working very hard with his team to persuade members of his case as he goes round the country. This now is the business end of the debate. It's going to be pretty gruelling, and I think it's the sort of test that he will welcome, because at the end of it all he will be even more ready, as I hope, to take office with a strong team around him to lead us in the years ahead.
I was quite surprised today picking up the Evening Standard, edited by one George Osborne, who has thrown his weight also behind Boris Johnson, and he said in this editorial they were talking about the fact that actually we're looking at a candidate who's the most likely to bring back a revised Brexit deal, or maybe even look at the idea of a second referendum. I mean, there's a lot of different people expecting a lot of different things from a Boris Johnson premiership. That's going to be a problem.
Well, look, the Boris Johnson I know is a moderate, open-minded, one-nation conservative. He happened to have taken a different path from me on Brexit, but the essence of Boris Johnson is a unifier. He wants to bring people together, he wants to listen, he wants to engage with the public, reach out from the tired walls of Westminster and actually make a direct case. That's what we need now, and that's why I'm backing him.
On Brexit, it's going to be so tricky. He's talking about leaving with or without a deal on the 31st of October. You don't want to leave without a deal.
Well, I don't want chaos. I don't want to crash out, and neither does he, which is why from the moment that I hope he will take office, he will be working with his team to ensure that that doesn't happen. That's his policy. He's talking robustly, as he should. I have no problem with that. But as I've said, I think he is the best person now to unite us and to take the fight to Jeremy Corbyn and Labour, to make the case that there is a clear divide here in our politics, a choice to be made, a choice between a one-nation united Tory party or what I worry about, the extreme nature of what we're facing from a Labour Party which has changed radically from the days of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown.
Okay, Robert Buckland, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to cruelly move you out of the way, bring someone else in who is waiting behind you, who is Mel Stride, who's here with me now. Just give me your reaction.
Well, obviously very disappointed.
Obviously backing Michael Gove.
Yes, backing Michael Gove, so very disappointed, particularly as it was so close, but then sometimes that's the way life is. But I really do pay tribute to Michael. I think he fought a very upfront, very clear, very principled campaign, and I think he did extremely well, particularly as he had a few bumps in the road along the way. I think, well, what I know of Michael actually is he'll be back at the desk tomorrow morning. He's got a very important job in Cabinet, which he is very passionate about, and he will carry on working for the party in the country as he always has done.
I spoke to people from your team a little earlier, and actually I felt they were feeling quite optimistic. Now, there has been, as you know, talk of Boris Johnson people voting for Jeremy Hunt in order to keep Michael Gove off the last two. Do you think any of that's been going on?
At first glance, and I've only just sort of really received the result and started to mull it over in my mind, I don't think that did happen, because I think if it had done, either they were incredibly brilliant and they got it right down to a 2-vote margin, which I suppose is conceivable, but I think very unlikely. And I think if that kind of centralised corralling of votes and bringing them in en bloc, if they had been doing that, I think you would have seen a much bigger discrepancy between Jeremy Hunt and Michael Gove. So, and I'm pleased by that. I think that's a good sign. It shows that the contest was healthier than some might have thought it would be.
And just finally, have you thought about who you will back?
I haven't decided yet, but what I can say is two things. One is I think we have two excellent candidates here, and the second thing is whichever one of them does finally prevail, they will have my utter support, because what we've really got to do now is get Brexit done, and more important, or as important as that, is to go out and make sure that Jeremy Corbyn never darkens the door of number 10 Downing Street.
Mel Stride, thank you very much indeed for coming to talk to us. I know you're very disappointed. So a reaction here from lots of people looking ahead now to several more weeks of this still to go.
Indeed, we look forward to that. Vicky, thank you very much indeed. Vicky Young there. That's just about it from me in this special coverage of the final round as far as MPs are concerned of the Conservative leadership contest, in which Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt are, as you now know, the final two to go through to the wider Tory party membership. I want to thank our guests here in the studio who've been watching and listening to it with us. Laura Trott, former advisor to David Cameron, and Joey Jones, former advisor to Theresa May. Thank you for your expertise. Let's just leave you with a tweet, actually, we've had in from one of the defeated contenders today, Sajid Javid, and it's a handwritten letter. And he says, "If my ambition and conduct in this contest has set an example for anyone, then it has been more than worth it. My message to kids like me, this is my message to children growing up as I did, to kids who look and feel a bit different to their classmates, those who don't have many toys or private tutors, those who feel like outsiders and wonder whether opportunity is just for other people. Work hard, have faith in your abilities, and don't let anyone try to cut you down to size or say you aren't big enough figure to aim high. You have as much right as anyone to a seat at the top table, to be ambitious for yourself and to make your voice heard. So seize every opportunity that this wonderful country presents to you with both hands. You and our best days lie ahead." So that's a rousing message there from Sajid Javid. He hasn't gone through to the final two. We know now that that is Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt. Right, let's get some sports news for you now. On BBC News, it's time for Sports Day.
Well, that was interesting, wasn't it? Even though we knew what was going to happen. We knew it was cunt versus Boris. Or Boris versus cunt, whichever one you fucking want to pick. But yeah, it was close though. 2 votes. Not bad, not bad. We know what question time's going to be about tonight then, don't we? Fucking Tory leadership candidates. Ugh. What some shite. Anyway, I will be back later for question time as usual. Around about 10:30. Yeah. I think it's about 10:30 tonight. I'm not too sure what time it's on. It's only about 10:30. Was it 10:35, something like that? So, yes, I hope you all have a good evening. And all that good jizz. Yeah, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe button, all that shit. And hit the bell so you remember when, I subscribe. Whatever. Doesn't matter. See you tonight.